We are the Alberta Teachers Association. We are unique in Canada. We are professional. We are union. We need to understand who we are and where we came from.
What a union really is people. It's people who share a common interest, have common goals, and a common agenda in terms of what they want to see accomplished.
A union is a body of people that's established under statute. And the important part of it being established under statute is it has the force of law. If you were a union that didn't form under statute, then you'd just be an interest group. But a union being established under statute means that it has the power of being able to go into the courts and settle matters there.
The power of a union, I believe, can create community among the labor force and to pull people together that we're working for a common cause in our everyday jobs, and we're also working together for a common cause for the betterment of society.
Well, I think all you have to do is look at places and sectors where unions aren't present, and the situation where that you don't have an organization representing you means you are at the mercy of your employer, you're at the mercy of the politicians, you're at the mercy of whatever agenda comes down the pike.
I think it's important because not everybody is willing to speak up for themselves, and I think that we need to have the union that's there to take the voice and to make it louder than one individual can make it.
Because as a single individual in an enormous system, you have very little power. You even have very little presence. You're a number on a payroll stub.
And working together on like-minded areas of concern, that's important too, because you develop more of a collegial relationship, you develop a relationship across the profession itself, and you become more interested and involved in the work of colleagues.
I believe that as members of our union, we need to keep apprised of what's going on. For example, in our union, we have a website. Information is posted regularly, and I believe it is a person's responsibility or a member's responsibility to access that website and to be able to talk about it and be able to converse about it with other members of our profession and our union. I don't think they should wait monthly just to see if there's a report coming out from a meeting.
The individual has to be involved and say, I have a good idea, and I want to advance it. That's what they need to do. And then they have to accept the collective body's decision on that item and say, okay, now we're going to do this together.
Our workload today is absolutely enormous. And as a classroom teacher, at the end of the day, it's very, very hard to take that extra step to go and to inform yourself of what's going on. But in the end, knowing, for example, what's inside of your collective agreement is only going to help you as an employee.
Well, collective bargaining, in my opinion, is the most critical thing that any union does. It, of course, provides the legal framework for whatever takes place in the workplace, and also provides the remuneration for the individual employee.
It has to do with balance between the employer, who pays the bill, and the teachers who supply the service.
And it involves the union, first of all, finding out from its members what is most important to them, and then bargaining, as you would bargain for anything with an employer, to obtain as many of those working conditions as possible. But of course, bargaining means give and take, and so the employer also comes in with some wishes or some demands, and it's a matter of establishing what's most important to both sides and coming to an agreement.
So when you sign a collective agreement, both sides have equality. The employer can't lord it over the employee, and the employee can't lord it over the employer. they come into this agreement together.
Imagine thousands of Calgary public teachers lining up in front of the superintendent's office, each to talk about their individual concerns and seeking their individual contract of employment and their own individual terms and conditions. Well, it's a novel idea, but I don't think it would be very workable. Not even your board would be interested in that kind of an approach.
Plus, it provides a measure of protection. When a union member gets into difficulty, rather than have to use the courts or their own personal finances, this is when the duty of fair representation comes in, and the union then has to represent its members.
It is a continuous process. Even though it has time periods, the fact is it's always going on in one form or another. When the collective agreement is settled, the grievance procedure takes over. So it is almost an eternal type of link between employer and employee.
The stabilization of teaching and learning conditions in CBE was the result of the collective action of teachers in the 1980s, and it served as a blueprint for the advancement of teachers' working conditions across the province, and it also served as major milestones for advancement in learning conditions for teachers in Canada. And that happens from collective action. It happens, and it's mutually advantageous. It's good for teachers, but it's also good for students and the board. At the end of the day, the teachers' teaching conditions are the students' learning conditions.
I could think of several, probably back in 1983 when Local 38's negotiators and the Calgary Board of Education negotiated the pupil-teacher ratio provision. That was in the collective agreement. What it was really a staffing clause, and it allowed the board to be able to justify hiring more teachers. It also provided a limit to the number of students that you'd ultimately have in classrooms. And what it did is it also provided employment to a whole new group of people who otherwise might have been frozen out.
One example would be in the area of professional improvement leaves, where teachers for many years felt they had no voice in who was getting the leaves, how many were getting the leaves, what the criteria was for determining that situation. That was put on the table. It took many years, but it was eventually resolved by setting up a process in which the local had a very large voice in that, by setting a number, if you will, a percentage, a ratio of how many people would obtain them, and by giving equality to the selection process.
In 2002, when 21,000 teachers in Alberta went on strike, of which Calgary Public was one of the groups that took that labor action, of which, of course, the government ordered people back. The association then challenged the back-to-work order, won that, which everyone was surprised about, and then we wound up in arbitration, and that was the settlement then that came out of that, where the teachers all across Alberta and in Calgary got 14.09%. Now, there was a cost to Calgary public teachers, and that had to do with the pupil-teacher ratio provision and some of their working conditions, which took a while to try to renegotiate back. And if memory serves me correctly, that's going to be a challenge for teachers in this next round of bargaining, and good on them.
But a real win-win for me would be the maternity leave clause. I am presently on maternity leave, and it's wonderful the fact that I know at the end of the day that I have a job to come back to.
One of my concerns, one of my individual interests was I wanted to see a greater time given for paternity leave, and that's what I wrote into the survey. And so we went to the initial meeting, or the initial position meeting, and I saw this included as part of the initial position, that we were going to increase the time requested for paternity leave. And then it came back as a report later for when we were going to be voting on the collective agreement that the time indeed had been increased. Now, by the time my daughter was born, that couldn't affect me anymore, but it made me feel good to know that something that I had requested in the survey had gone into the collective agreement, and that both the board, it was reported, and our side agreed that it was something that was beneficial.
And substitute teachers, in very, very, even a greater extent than classroom teachers, are continually impacted by the vagaries of supply and demand. And from time to time, they have been sort of neglected, I believe, as we've hit the bargaining table. I think one of the major breakthroughs that we've made in the last few years has, of course, allowing them to go on grid on the second day. And to me, that's an essential fairness, which I am very pleased that we've finally gotten to.
Well, one that comes to mind is personal leave days. Everyone in their lives has times when they need to take some time off work, not a lot of time, and it can be convenient to be able to call in and have a personal leave day and to not give a reason for it at the time, because it might be something that's private. So in that way, the employer is fulfilling a need that they recognize is just a human occurrence, and the employee is able to access time to be able to fulfill something that makes them basically a member of society.
The first thing that comes to mind, and it's not something that I am very well versed at, to be honest, is the unfunded liability that we got rid of in the last collective agreement. I think that if we wouldn't have got it done then, I don't know if it ever would have happened. And it's something that seems like it was, like that people talk about that have been in education and been a teacher for such a long time, that it's going to help us in the future as we move forward. And it's just nice that that's kind of not there anymore.
Where would you go if you didn't like what it was you were assigned to teach, or if you felt that you were being treated unfairly? How would you handle that? It would be lonely.
Well, if we didn't have an ATA, the world would look an awful lot like it did in Calgary in 1934. In 1934, the Calgary Board of Education fired its entire teaching staff. All the principals, all the teachers, all of central office, and hired back the teachers that the board wanted to hire. This was an interesting process because the principal of Crescent Heights High School was not rehired and became the leader of the Social Credit Party, and in 1935, the Premier of Alberta. And one of the first things that the new Premier of Alberta did was to require school boards to offer contracts of employment to all teachers in the province, and also to put in a mechanism to make sure that any board who took action against a teacher, there would be a neutral third party to deal with that.
In a perfect world where everybody is going to be kind and generous and fair, there would be no need for unions. Unfortunately, we're not there yet. We're working on it. In this province, the reason why we have one of the best education systems in the world, and I believe this, is because the Alberta Teachers Association has been a strong and vocal advocate on behalf of teachers, but on behalf of kids. And of course, at the end of the day, in my opinion, what's good for teachers is good for kids. And it works that way.
Probably when I first started teaching, I didn't see much need for an association, and I wasn't very involved. And I see that in a lot of young teachers. It's get in and survive the teaching day and depend on your fellow teachers and on your administration for assistance. But the more I was involved, and 1980 was one of the grand openings for me of the importance of the association. And my pride in being part of this association grew over that time. And even now, after several years of retirement, I'm still proud.
I think about the work that females have done over the years for young women. And I sometimes want to remind young women, you're able to do this because of what's gone before. And so I would like to say to new teachers, we're able to do this because of the work that has gone on before in our association, in our union.
There have been years, there have been decades in this province where the only organized voice speaking up for kids, speaking up for classrooms, has been the Alberta Teachers Association and its locals. It wasn't the school boards who were cowed by the threats of the provincial government. It wasn't the provincial government who had other priorities largely involved with cutting costs and rewarding their friends. The only organized group who spoke up for kids was the Alberta Teachers Association. We know that, parents know that, and the government knows that. So over the years, we've done a lot of things for individual teachers, for groups of teachers, for all teachers. And it's largely been achieved through collective bargaining. And if I can be blunt, it's been achieved when teachers have been prepared to take it to the line, to be prepared to strike for principles, to strike for what they considered to be important. That was when we achieved a large number of these really important issues.